Yes, yes. So good afternoon, each and everyone. I am Jannette Lumley, the host of Reggae Lution on the Move, which is broadcast on Eglinton TV each week. And each week, as you know, we bring in different guests, different people based on topics. I have in studio with me this afternoon the founder of CanEx Jamaica, which is Mr. Douglas K. Gordon. And I'm going to be interviewing him because I'm so excited about this movement with cannabis and how that is going on, and even here with us in North America or Canada, to get more knowledgeable on the cannabis movement and stuff like that. So Mr. Gordon, welcome to the Reggae Lution Talk Show. Sir, how are you?
I am doing fantastic, thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
You know what? Here in Canada and throughout my shows, I always talk about where I am in the world because the virtual world give us that ability. So the weather is okay outside now, but I know in the evenings it becomes a bit cooler because
Already, okay.
yeah, we're now transitioning into fall, which would begin on the 20th or the 21st of this month, right? Which takes us to December.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, to January. And then winter kicks in, right? Yeah, so it's just that. So you don't mind me calling you Douglas?
Not at all. I prefer it.
All right. So Douglas, when did you found CanEx Jamaica?
We started CanEx in 2016. So immediately after Jamaica decriminalized and introduced the regulations and the legislation for the legal industry, we saw, just by happenstance, we happened to come across, some articles that were happening internationally, that we could see the sort of progress, the types of people who were getting behind the industry, very early investment community type of movers. And then, we saw in Jamaica at that particular time, I remember watching a news broadcast, and they had a town hall meeting, and the big response was really about a fair, this is my interpretation, of allowing people from overseas, foreigners, if you will, to come in and just take over the industry, allow folks with larger dollars to just completely displace those who had, put in the time, who'd made the sacrifices, whose identity had really become so globally associated with cannabis. And in that cool way that so many people around the world associate Jamaica and ganja and reggae music, it's all sort of one cultural experience that they put together. And it was a real fear that, these people, these folks, if you will, were going to get left behind and left out. And I'm originally from Trinidad. And so in Trinidad, we invented the steel pan. And so the only instrument, invented in the 21st century. And then we sat on our hands and it got trademarked in Japan. And so, yeah. And so when that became public knowledge, there's this mass outcry in Trinidad. The government needs to do something, and this is wrong. And it might have been wrong, but there's nothing the government could do. If you don't take action when you need to, you suffer the consequences. And just because I had that sort of perspective, I looked at this and I said, gosh, if we get stuck worrying about what might happen, we're not going to spend the energy on making sure that we blaze the path we need to blaze so that Jamaica has, takes full advantage of all this investment and sacrifice. When I say investment, I mean the conscious choices that so many people made to talk about cannabis and talk about, ganja, and talk about the spiritual process and usage, in spite of people telling them you can't do that, in spite of people looking down on them, because that was sort of not considered to be ukora, if you will, and they did it in spite of that, because that was their culture, that was their belief, that was their spiritual sort of anchor point. And so I just looked at that and I said, if I can see this and I see these two parallels, what could I do? I'm not really a ganja man, so to speak, but I'm a Caribbean person. And I've always wanted to see the Caribbean prosper. And whatever I could do toward that end, I've always said I would do. And here I was in a situation where, because of my experience and my background, I saw something that to me was, the writing was on the wall, so to speak. If we didn't do something, that we'd be, all we'd be doing is trading Kleenex for Trinidad and Jamaica about opportunity past. And I wasn't just going to not do anything. And that's where CanEx was born. Let's put a platform together where we could bring people from the Caribbean and in Jamaica specifically at that point, to learn from people who are operating in the legal space, so that you could bring cultivators from legal jurisdictions together with cultivators in Jamaica who wanted to get into the legal side of things. You could bring doctors, you could bring scientists, you could bring business operators, you could bring investors. So you really had a cross-pollination in terms of Jamaica that was now getting legal, and these other jurisdictions which already had legalization up and running. And that was really what we were born to do. And that's what we continue to do, as far as providing a platform where these different perspectives and knowledge and experience and can all be ventilated, but also in an environment that fosters a lot of networking. A lot of strategic partnerships have been born at CanEx. A lot of investment has come out of CanEx, but also where, especially in this 5th year of our hosting, but the 7th year since it was legalized in Jamaica, where we can actually all come together and talk through some of the challenges and identify some of the potential solutions. But more than anything, Jannette, my great hope for CanEx this year is that we can emerge from this in Jamaica as a unified industry, or somewhere along the path to being unified, where, the traditional Rastafarian small farmer, if you will, and the licensed producer who's invested money and all of that into the industry and has been trying to be as compliant as possible with the regulations, and the regulators can all come away from this with a unified sense that we have a massive opportunity here in Jamaica. And the only way that we're going to unlock that value is if we work together, if we respect one another and come together. So that's my big goal for CanEx 2022.
Okay. Oh, you spoke of so many things, in that introduction, which is great, which, because you answered some of the questions that I had to ask. Okay. So, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take just a brief break, and I'll be right back.
Sure.
Yes, so for those of you who are just joining us, again, I'm Jannette Lumley, host of the Reggae Lution on the Move talk show, broadcast on Eglinton TV. And in studio this afternoon, I have with me Mr. Douglas Gordon. And in touch a little bit on how CanEx started, but I wanted to further talk about or ask him about cannabis for somebody who's new to the industry and wanted to get an understanding of cannabis, what it represents, and more or less how can somebody get involved and stuff like that. So that's the next segment here I'll be talking about. So Douglas, what can you explain to the massive about cannabis? And I know you already said what you perceive or what you've seen it to be, but how now can you explain to myself and others about cannabis and ganja, marijuana?
Well, I mean, there's so many things to explain, Jannette, but in its simplest terms, one of the biggest challenges we have is the stigmas, the idea that it's wrong. And, I try as you might, when you talk to grandma, well, there must have been a reason why they made that decision. They're not just going to wake up one day and just do it. You know what I mean? And these are folks who have been on the receiving end much more closely than most of us of, the most egregious acts, just because of being, Black or impoverished or whatever. And yet, they are at this stage and they're saying there must have been a good reason why they did that. And I think the first thing that we have to understand is that cannabis was on what's called the American Pharmacopoeia up until the late 1930s. That means the American Pharmacopoeia is, think of it as like this big database or big reference book where all the doctors can use that book to determine what they should be prescribing for patients, what the medical community has identified and deemed to be safe and effective as medicine to treat their patients. Okay, so a lot of people don't understand that. And then in the 1940s, that's kind of where it really started, 1930, late 1930s, 1940s, where it's the American textile industry, because of the perceived threat that was posed by hemp, right, to textiles. That's why they started this path of getting cannabis to be deemed illegal, because it was the whole cannabis and hemp plant, right? But because of the use of cannabis, they use that to paint the entire brush, right? Of smoking, and people are going to get high and they don't know what they're doing. It has no medical benefit, blah, blah, blah. And so much so that when they actually made it illegal, the medical community was like, but what are we going to replace it with? How could you do this? Because this is an effective medicine for treating my patients. What am I supposed to do now? So you see, if we don't have that reference point to understand that in a room, some gentleman decided, and it's all gentlemen at that point, that their commercial interest would be better served if this was not a part of the potential equation, right? That's what happened. And then it began a whole PR and other campaign that built upon itself, till it reached its pinnacle with the war on drugs, right? And the war on drugs became a manifestation of this ill-fated, zero basis campaign that was now waged against people of color, right? So if we don't understand the genesis of when this became a prohibited substance, it's very difficult for people to say, well, I'm open to hearing now because, I need to understand why it was bad and now it's good, right? How can something that was bad is now good? It was never bad. It was only deemed bad, quote unquote, because people had other vested interests, right? And so when people talk of the health benefits, they're essentially resuming a conversation that took place many, many eons ago prior to prohibition. We all have something in our body called the endocannabinoid system, okay? Our body produces cannabinoids. Cannabinoids promote homeostasis. So the simplest example I can give you is when I'm 17 years old and I go play football and I turn my ankle, right? And I come back limping and my mother says, oh my gosh, you won't be able to play for a while, son. 2 days later, I'm playing football like nothing happened because my body has healed itself, right? The endocannabinoid system moderates what's wrong with us, and then it attacks the pain points, it attacks the problem areas, and it helps us to heal ourselves. That same injury, and then over time, we produce decreasing amounts of cannabinoids. So that same injury, when I decided 40 years old, I'm still going to try to be a baller, that takes me 7 months to recover, right? And I'm hobbling around in the meantime, and my kids are like, what is wrong with you, daddy? That was a long time ago. You should be better by now, right? Because my body doesn't produce the same level of cannabinoids. So when I ingest cannabinoids, which come from the cannabis plant, right? What it does is people think, oh, so it's going, the cannabinoids are now fixing your body. No, it's actually much more organic than that. That cannabinoid that I now consume stimulates my endocannabinoid system to produce the cannabinoids, and that's what heals my body, right? So it's really a part of a chain that is all about the fundamental fact that our bodies have the ability to heal themselves, okay? And so my last point on this, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it too long, but so this is why, particularly in elderly communities, I make such a strong, passionate case for this, because if you've lived your life and gone through all the obstacles and all the different varietals that life gives us, and you arrive at 65, 70, 80 years old, and now you want to play with your grandchildren, and you have to decide which time you're going to get up and play with them, because all of the aches and the pains, you can't take it every time. You can't jump up every time, they want to play with grandma or grandpa. We have a natural healing medicine that you can take that affords you the opportunity to live without pain, gives you back a quality of life that you deserve. And of course, that is all the way through. You know, even younger generations, we all have aches and pains as we get older. That's a fundamental value on a very easy living example that we can all access, let alone some of the more, you know, esoteric and more, you know, developed medicines that have come out of that as a base product, right? This is on a very basic level, how cannabis can support people living a fuller life.
Wow. And you know what? That's so ironic because a few months ago, I visited one of the reserve here in out in Kingston. And when I got there, I noticed all these different cannabis plants, which was surprising to me. So I'm going through and I said, okay, so what are these? So I saw the different strain. They have like 70-30, 50-50. So
Yeah.
she was asking me, do you need the plant for calming, for relaxation? I don't know. I said, I don't know. I just, questioning to see how beneficial it would be. So based on what you're saying, no, it's given me a better understanding or overstanding of what the whole industry is doing in terms of the strains that you're using. They now have brownies, they now have gummy bears, wines, and all these stuff that's made from cannabis,
Yes.
right? And that got me, and I'm saying, wow, that's how important this plant is. But I'm not sure in terms of how they farm it or how they cultivate it to determine the strains, right? So that's something that's puzzling to me as well, to determine the strain in it. Do they extract to get it to that level? This is where the confusion comes in, because they have like the sativa and the what is it?
Indica.
CBC. Yeah, and the
The
TP.
sativa, indica is CBD,
Right,
CBG,
right. Yeah,
lots
so
of different compounds.
yeah, so this is
But
where
here's the thing. It's like the fundamentally, right? There's I think about 143, 148 compounds they've identified
yes,
in the
yes, that's good.
cannabis plant, right? And they haven't really, there's a lot more that they think that are there. They all have some common values that help in our endocannabinoid system. Some have more specific areas that we can use them for, that some have been studied to be more effective in treating cancer cells, certain types of cancer cells, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But on a fundamental level, right, there's no disputing the health benefits of cannabis. You can have different strains, yes, just like you can decide that, water is something that we should consume. But sometimes it's a little lemon water, sometimes it's from a spring, sometimes it's from here, sometimes it's from there. But fundamentally, when we consume water, it's good for our body. We know that, okay? It's not too dissimilar, with the difference being that some of those strains have more specific benefits based on certain ailments. And more of that is being researched and tested. But you see, when you talk about edibles, right? And you talk about brownies and gummies and chocolates and all these different formats, what we're now looking at is how does a person want to consume their cannabis, right? Because again, as we move along, a lot of people, they don't listen to how cannabis can help them because they associate it with the smoke and they don't want to smoke. You know what I mean? So the fact is, that's fine, because you can consume cannabis in many different ways. It doesn't have to be through smoking. So if you're at a point in your life, or you have a certain outlook on smoking that says, I don't want anything to go through my lungs, I don't want that kind of involvement, that's perfectly fine. But listen to understand that there are many different form factors you can have to consume your cannabis and get your medicine. You can get things injected into you. You can have pills, you can have a tincture. There's lots of different ways to take your medicine. There's lots of different ways to consume your cannabis. But we first have to be able to listen and understand. So instead of providing a blockage, we're now saying, now I understand it. I have questions to sort of, question the veracity or double check some of the sources. All of that's fine. but we get to a place where we understand how this can effectively help people. And that's the most important part.
Okay, okay, so we're gonna take another break and then we'll be right back.
Okay.
So welcome back again, everyone. As I said before many times, I'm on the Reggae Lution Talk Show with Douglas Gordon, founder of CanEx, which I'm looking forward to hear who is gonna be coming on as guest speakers and when the event will be. But before I do that, so Douglas, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about before the decriminalization of cannabis, and now that it's legalized, but yet persons were putting it, locking up in jail for even maybe taking a ounce of weed on them or cannabis on them, and now they still have that charge on their name or that conviction on their name. What can you how should I say this? How do you see it maybe in a few years, if there's anything that will be put into place to maybe for them dropping the charges or things like those?
Well, I mean, I certainly think, and I've heard it mentioned, and I believe, and I'm pretty sure it's been, publicly disseminated, that there would be the release of people who've been incarcerated with, certain quantities below a certain threshold, right? I don't think that's happened. And to be truthful, I'm glad you've raised this question, because I need to go and refresh myself with this, because I should know this a lot better. But I don't know that that's happened. And I don't know that there's any sort of appreciable excuse as to why it shouldn't have happened. When you're talking about quantums of cannabis that are just so insignificant that people are using for their personal use, or for part of their sacrament, that we today understand that that's a legitimate use, that's a legitimate legal use, right? Then yeah, we should undo what has been done to some degree, meaning allow a pathway for all of these folks to be let out of jail, because the impact that's been done to them as people and their families is irreversible. But let's look at how we can actually help them to be, productive members of society and reunite families. One of the things that has to happen, and I've seen it talked about, and some programs have done it in the States already, where they've, released prisoners, is you have to have a program to help these folks re-enter society. I'm not going to speculate, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't want to speculate, but I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that, prison life in Jamaica and prison life at the worst set of prisons in the North America is night and day, and so the reality of it is, if folks were incarcerated for even very small quantities, what they have experienced now in life in a prison will change them, substantially as individuals. Their dispute resolution, all of that is going to be completely warped. And we have to help them by giving them a pathway back into society, such that they can now go on and try to rebuild their lives and be the people that they want to be, without that hanging over them. And I'm not sure we've really addressed that from a sort of societal support perspective in a way that we really should have. And that's something that I truly hope that we will do as an industry, is really find the programs to support, the path for people to get out of jail, out of prison, which is costing the country tons of money. But not just the money, it's costing people their lives. Each one of us, we think of where we want to be next year and the path that we have to trod to get there, the struggles, the victories, the whole 9 yards. But can you imagine that perspective if it was just narrowed down to a box in certain hours in the night and somebody giving you the food? And you know what I mean? That's a very different world. So we have to find ways to build those programs so we help people get back their lives and become productive members of society again.
Basically, it's integration. How can they
Mm-hmm.
integrate back into society and be productive?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
For them. The next topic I wanted to touch on is So the main purpose why you're here today is about this event that you have coming up, right? The
Well, the
15th?
main purpose why I'm here is because you asked me to. So if you
Okay.
wanted me to come
Well,
and talk
thank
about
you.
the weather, I would have been happy to do that. So thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Yeah, so the second reason why you're here is about your event that's coming up soon, which in another week. Is that
Absolutely.
the 16th, the 17th, or the 15th, the
It's
16th?
15th, 16th, and 17th at our events, but our conference and expo is actually the Thursday and Friday, which is the 15th and 16th.
Okay, great. So can you elaborate on that for us? What the guest speakers who will be there and all this, so what will they be talking about and stuff like that?
Sure. I mean, we have industry operators. So we have folks who are in the licensed industry here in Jamaica, like business owners and operators. We also have, folks from Raga, folks from different ganja co-op groups, the Westmoreland group, St. Anne group. We also have people from the Cannabis Licensing Authority here. Internationally, we have, as our keynotes, 4 incredibly successful women. We have a lady by the name of Wanda James, who runs a company called Simply Pure in Colorado. And Wanda is actually Jamaican, but she is also recognized as one of the pioneers in the development of the legal cannabis space in the United States. We have another lady, Toy Hutchinson, who heads up an organization called the Marijuana Policy Project. And Toy was also very instrumental in writing and passing some of the regulations in Illinois for their cannabis industry over there. She has a lot of experience in that respect. We have a lady by the name of Jamie L. Pearson who just left, but she used to run a company called Bang. And Jamie has, taken that, which is an edibles company, that's chocolates, she was saying before, but, taken that company from, one state to I think 20 plus states in the US and then 10 international countries. So she's a real expert in terms of navigating the complexities of a licensing industry, and one in which, because it's not federally legal in the United States, you can produce in California for California, but you have to produce in Oregon for Oregon, and you have to produce in Washington State for Washington State, and so on and so on and so on. So, it's not the same sort of pathway you would follow in a typical licensing deal across the United States. So she has a lot of experience in that. And then finally, we have Dr. Annabelle Manolo Morgan. And so she's actually married to Gramps Morgan. So let's get that out of the way.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, Morgan Heritage, right?
Yes, yes.
But I mean, an incredibly accomplished scientist. She's doing clinical trials with cannabis. And she works with one of the larger cannabis companies in the world called Flora Growth. So, you have speakers who represent different paths, different expertise in the industry. They're all, our keynotes are all women, yeah, as I mentioned. But that kind of diversity of experience and expertise we're going to bring. We also have a couple of NFT panels. So we're talking about reggae music, crypto, and NFTs, and how that becomes a pathway with cannabis to really create a brand identity and something that you can commercialize. We have conversations about psychedelics. So you're now talking about psychedelic retreats, are a very big and fast growing business in Jamaica. We have conversations about that with people who execute these retreats, can speak to both the spiritual indigenous approach as well as the modern medical mental health benefits that people are seeing from these retreats, and why Jamaica has, it's a closing window, but it's certainly a very lucrative potential window of opportunity in pursuing some of those initiatives. We have conversations around sustainability. Again, hemp, cannabis, they're incredibly powerful for the earth and the environment. Soil erosion is a massive problem in the Caribbean. We have these islands that depend so much on tourism, but we're not doing the right things agriculturally. And with climate change coming along, all we're doing is shortening the timelines between now and when we actually stop being able to generate revenues from these things. So, cannabis is a healing plant, right? And you have to respect what it stands for. And what we're trying to do is build conversations and build integrity with all our participants around that. bring the industry together in Jamaica, because, we've all gone in our different ways. We've done it quintessentially as we do in the Caribbean. I know what I'm doing. Nobody needs to tell me anything. I got this. We're at a point where people know that's not working. So now we need to shift and do something different. So wonderful content, great investment opportunities, great relationship building. And then we layer all of that with great networking. So we have parties. We have a party called High Vibes with Bushman is performing, and Yardcore is also performing, a real sort of vibe, so come out, bonfire, Rasta chanting, drums, just really feel it by the beach, And then on Saturday, we have a golf tournament. So we have Anthony Anderson, the actor. I don't know if you know him from Blackish, but he's coming down. He's participating in that. And then we have a party on Saturday afternoon called Eyes Wide Shut, which is an all-white party right on the beach here at Rose Hall Great House. So, I mean, not Great House, Rose Hall Beach Club. So it's a variety of things, but, really based around great networking, great content, great educational opportunity. And we really want to see people from Jamaica come out and learn about this industry. This industry has the opportunity to change lives in Jamaica. Jamaica has a GDP per capita of $4,500 US, $4,500 US per capita in this country. And cannabis is an opportunity to materially change that. It's something that we can produce locally and serve an entire universe of over 190 countries very readily as places become legal. So it's something that we have to take seriously, and we have to learn what our opportunity is in it and then pursue it.
All right, so I'm gonna take another break and we'll be right back. So welcome back, everyone. We're in the final stage of the interview with Douglas Gordon from CanEx Jamaica. And I'm so excited about this conference that they will be hosting on the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th of this month. And that's the reason why I wanted to bring it forward to give some promotion to this. I would call it an influential event, because it's going to open up a lot of doors for many of us who are in the industry and wants to get into the industry. So Douglas, any final words before we close off?
I would just say that, with Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, reggae music, the Rastafari culture, and everything else that Jamaica stands for, okay? It has an opportunity, and it has interest, it has demand globally in this particular industry, right? And that means when you only have 3 million people, and you have, a globe of billions of people, a sliver of a slice, right? Divided by 3 million is a massive input to this country. Right? The cannabis industry is estimated to produce 10 to 15 jobs per acre in the legal market. Okay? It's very, very, very feasible to have $50,000 to $100,000 acres, in production in Jamaica. If you do some simple arithmetic, you'll realize Jamaica doesn't even have the workforce to do that. So you begin to understand how accessible this opportunity can truly be if we come together, we work smart, and we take the right steps. And one other thing that I'm really proud about what we're doing with this year is we have a team out of Los Angeles who are coming in to film a documentary. They become familiar with what we are as CanEx, but again, they're drawn as well to the types of speakers we have, the types of conversations we're having, the fact that all of this is in Jamaica. And it's going to be a very fascinating documentary, because it's going to go to the heart and soul and the essence of the plant. And it's going to represent all the different areas that you can be involved in this plant, from, as I said before, science to business to spirituality to the indigenous use, and bring that forward so you can really educate people around the world, because it's going to go out on a very significant platform, right? About this plant. But the part I love the most is it's going to be anchored in Jamaica. You know what I mean? It's for a global consumption. It's for a viewer who could be from Croatia, from London, from Toronto, from wherever, right? Who's just now learning about cannabis, wants to know some more. Here's a documentary that they can pick up on Netflix or whatever and learn, but it's coming from Jamaica.
Which is,
right?
again, branding Jamaica.
It's branding, but when I talk about authenticity as well, you
Yes,
see, brand values to me have to be authentic and
yes,
true to what you represent.
yes.
And we are now in what I consider the heart and soul of this industry. And so where else would you have an authentic conversation that spoke to all the different arenas, all the different aspects, than in the heart and the soul of the industry? And that's what I think Jamaica to me represents. So we're very proud of that. But again, it's a coming together of all these different initiatives that I think makes this year so special. And we hope truly catalyzes the industry and the opportunity in Jamaica.
One question before I go. For a local person, somebody who's been in the industry, that's how they've been making their money. A lot of those persons, that's how they finance their children to go to school.
Yes.
From what I know. How can they be a part of this cannabis industry to make it legal and to make it become a real business for them?
They just have to get registered. You know what I mean? They have to register their business, and they have to do it through the legal compliant channels.
And
The fact that they have an expertise, the fact that they know how to sell, the fact that they listen, legal or illegal, right? Just because you're doing something illegally, quote unquote, does not mean you're going to be successful. You have to know what you're doing. You have to navigate buying at one price, selling at another price. When people owe you, making sure they pay you, or enough of them pay you, they can keep your business afloat. So the point is, if they have a certain level of business acumen, right, then it's a matter of coming into the legal landscape. And I think some of those pathways are what we need to continue to work on in the regulatory environment, so people have a path. There's no one out there who's making, even if they're making money, Jannette, who doesn't truly want to be able to tell their children or have their children say, this is what daddy does, or this is what mommy does, or come to mommy's workplace, or I'm going to take my children to work day, and it not be something that they have to be like, shh, don't tell anybody this is what it, there's no one. When you're trying to make a first buck and a $5 and a $10, sure, that doesn't matter. But when you achieve a certain level of success and continuity, you want to provide for your family and provide for yourself 100%, but you also want to be considered a respectable citizen. You want to be able to go into the bank. You want to be able to go and wire the funds for your kids to go to college, right? So no matter what you tell me, there are more people who want to do that who are not in the system, but are successful at it. And some are not that successful at it, but they're there. We have to create a path where they can come into the legal regulated market, but we have to do one that makes sense. You can't just tell them that they need 72 pages worth of documentation that they can never provide, which is basically saying, stay over there and do what you're doing. Because if our goal is to make this as thriving for the Jamaican population as possible, then we need to capture income taxes, we need to capture GCT, we need to capture, more people being able to buy real estate. Why? Because they can pick what they want. They don't have to pick what they can only, through some shimmy-dimmy pay for with cash, right? So those are all the things that we can then see happen. Once we create a path that is reasonable to have everybody go down the same lane. But again, if you pick the path to follow the rules and the law, you have to stay in it. You can't just be in and out of it when it doesn't suit you. That's the whole way of becoming a legitimate business person, is you have to take the good with the bad. Sometimes the bad is incredibly frustrating, but if you remain committed to staying on that side of the fence, you use the creativity that you had to make it in any way lane will manifest for you.
Okay, so is this conference open to anyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. We promote it to everybody. We want people to come and learn about the cannabis industry. You know, I think this is such a massive opportunity that I would much prefer or insist that somebody come and check it out and say it's not for me, than stay on the outside and say, I don't think it's for me. No, come learn. If it's not for you, at least you know. But I'm pretty sure you'll find that there's something in it for you.
Is there a contact number or a website or somewhere that they can go to register?
Certainly. CanEx Jamaica, CANEX Jamaica.com. Everything's on there.
Okay, all right. So
All right.
it was wonderful having you in studio, Douglas, and I'm hoping one day we will meet in person.
I
So
look forward to it.
until, best of luck with your concerts for another year, and hoping to have you back in studio again as a follow-up.
Thank you very much.
All
Jeanette. I
right,
appreciate the time and I wish you the best day.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.